Lots of questions to get through. I know we've got a very short period of time, but I'd like to get through as many of them as possible with you. And I think for our readers, a subject which has been high on their agenda and also in the national media agenda has been the assisted dying law. I was interested to know what your own personal view is, and that of the Catholic Church, because I presume you would take a stance that life is a gift. How do you feel about this law change that happened a couple of weeks ago?
Well, I think both the assisted dying bill and the quickly passed abortion amendment to the Police and Criminal Acts bill, they represent a real foundational shift, I think, in society. Neither of which do I think are right, both of which I think are quite wrong in principle. Early on, last April, I put out a pastoral letter. I had 3 key phrases in it, and I would stick to them. You know, the first one was, be careful what you wish for, because this will expand. It's the experience in other places in the world. What starts off as something very guarded and very focused very quickly becomes more generally available, and it becomes like a condition almost. A condition of society. I was told the other day that in Canada, anybody now entering medical school has to sign up to be willing to take an active part in killing another person in assisted suicide. So be careful what you wish for. Second one was a right to die very quickly becomes a duty to die.
Okay.
So that, you know, the pressure is there. And we've heard so much from vulnerable people who say they fear, they are afraid of the change in expectations and therefore pressure on them. They begin to see themselves as a burden. They're counted as a burden. Maybe on the exchequer, maybe on their families, maybe in the circumstances of their life. And the third thing I said was, when we neglect the presence of God, then sooner or later we belittle each other. We belittle human beings because we lose that fundamental sense, as you said, that life is a gift, and with it is a dignity, is a kind of status of being a human person, and that goes as well. So they were my 3 first principal objections, and they've not changed, and I still think that I look to the House of Lords, not just to limit the damage, but maybe actually to stop this as well.
Do you also fear, with both abortion and assisted dying, that there could be a coercion element to both of them from, you know, with obviously vulnerable pregnant women?
I think the coercion bit is probably stronger in the assisted dying, actually. And it's very unclear as to what the duty that will be imposed on doctors, on nurses and palliative care people. It's very unclear what the future of palliative care hospices. We have a whole number of hospices, which in principle, you know, would be opposed to this. But will they be forced to cooperate? I mean, we've seen this once with the adoption agencies. Catholic adoption agencies don't exist anymore because they were forced to close on the same-sex marriage issue. But I think on the abortion, it's the real tragedy for this is for the women, for the woman who's bearing a baby and is in a terrible state and maybe very isolated, and now the law says she can abort that baby almost when it's about to be born. I mean, to leave a woman isolated like that, and the law hasn't changed, that anyone who assists her is then committing an offence. So cynically, I can only assume that that part of the law will be the next thing to be campaigned about, so that a doctor or someone may assist a woman to kill her about to be born baby.
Do you also have concerns? I mean, there'll be quite a lot of doctors that have actually spoken and go back on assisted dying. Their concerns that they're placed in a very difficult moral position, whether they have a religious feeling or not, that, you know, they got into their profession to save lives.
Yeah, exactly. And the NHS is a health service. shouldn't be a death service. I think, to me, what these debates show up is that when issues are important and are being discussed, it's vital to get behind them to understand the context in which this is taking place. And these debates are very illustrative of the fact that in our society there's been a shift of values, a cultural shift, and the context in which these issues come forward, you can think of as a kind of belief and a creed. So the firm belief in these issues is to do with the autonomy of the individual. And if you have a belief that puts that as its central tenet, its central article of faith, is that the individual has autonomy, then you're going to find sooner or later that other things which are, I believe, more radically true of human beings are damaged. So nobody, neither in their birth nor in their life, in their loving, in their creativity, is actually an autonomous individual. It's just not true.
You're talking about the ripple effect on other people.
Yeah, we depend on each other. We're corporate beings. But what will happen, say with the assisted dying, is that those links will be gradually damaged and weakened. So will I really trust the younger members of my family who see me now as a burden? Will it undermine family relationships? How will I look on the doctor? Will I trust the doctor as his sole interest is in helping me to live? Will it undermine my trust in the health service? Will I be somewhere in the back of my mind thinking, as I approach a hospital, this is going to become a death centre, and so on. So those trusts, those trusting relationships and connections between people actually are undermined when you say the most important part of my belief is the autonomy of the individual. And, you know, when we think about a creed, we always talk about articles of a creed.
Yeah.
And we use the word article because they're connected up. They're like a lorry. They're articulated. So one carries the other, carries the other, carries the other. And if you put in the front the autonomy of the individual, other things will follow, like day after night. And in my belief, and I think in many people's purely human instinct, they know that we're not automaton. We are not isolated individuals with our own autonomy. We depend on each other. And actually, we rejoice in depending on each other. That's what brings joy to life. Not being an autonomous individual, but being in a context of love and care and dependency, and knowing when I feel deeply vulnerable, there's a set of relationships on which I can rely.
It's a balancing act, isn't it? Because the people who are campaigning for the dignity in dying law, and it was Esther Ranson and her daughter were key in that, but there's obviously pressure groups and campaign groups. They were calling for the idea that it was a blessing to be rid of the pain, and to the people in that extreme pain, that terminal cancer pain, were seeking an end to their suffering. And you can see that side of it as well.
Of course I can see that side of it, but I know, and many people know, that good palliative care transforms that. And in fact, there have been some observers, I remember one, who wrote a long article in the paper saying he'd started out believing in assisted dying, but when his great friend was dying and in pain, he said the way he was treated in the hospice absolutely changed his mind. And he said, there in that hospice, I saw my dear friend being treated with great dignity, his pain was relieved, and he died in a way that he can only describe as dignified and peaceful. That's why it's so ironic to call suicide dignity in dying. Dignity in dying, dignity is bestowed when I recognize myself in this other person, when I recognize the connections between us, and I have the humility and the kind of willingness to serve them. So,
Yeah,
for me, these are the Rubicon that we've passed, and we have to work hard to build again a sense of the dignity of the individual and how when we serve each other, whether with a religious motive or not, we're actually building up the links that make for a decent society.
The government had a 10-year health plan which they announced last week, and there wasn't huge amounts in there on palliative care, and one could be cynical and say that so many MPs backed the assisted dying law because they were hoping that this would solve a financial problem for them. Do you think that could be it as well?
I think the government would seem very reluctant to make financial calculations on this. They did a bit. But I think what might be interesting in the Lords would be if someone would say there comes a point in medical treatment when there's a prognosis of death at which then a choice should be offered. And one element of that choice must be a well-funded, well-researched palliative care system. Now, it's interesting, isn't it, that there was the commission, the Independent Commission on Palliative Care, published its report the day before or 2 days before the vote on assisted dying. I don't think it was even read by most people. But that was a serious study of the needs of palliative care. And as far as I can see, it's been put to one side. We have to go back to that, and we have to see this essential part of our response to people being properly funded and not dependent, as it is at the moment, substantially on charity.
Okay, can I just changing tact a bit now? There's been quite a significant rise, it's been reported, in the number of young people who seem to be interested in the Catholic Church and the Christian faith in general in this country, Gen Z, as they would call it, that sort of age group. Have you noticed that, and can you attribute it to anything in particular? Are people searching for something?
Well, these things are quite difficult to detect sometimes.
Yes.
But word of mouth, most of the priests, and I would only speak for this diocese, for Westminster Diocese, most of the priests are young, we've seen that, especially, say, 19 to 30-year-old, and especially men. And certainly, we have a ceremony a few weeks before Easter, at which some of those who are becoming Catholics come to be acknowledged, as it were, in the cathedral. We had about 500. Now, I stood there and met most of them, and there were a lot of young people, women as well as men, and coming from all sorts of backgrounds. Some coming from no faith, a few from the faith of Islam, some from the Church of England or Baptists or whatever. Why? It's a really good question. Our society is a bit fragmented because it's under a lot of pressure.
Yeah. And
young people live lives that are very pressurized. And I think after a point they get to the question of what's this really for? Why am I striving so hard? It's not just for a bank account. That's not going to give me satisfaction in life. I need a better sense of direction. Now, sometimes that comes, with a contact, a friend, and then they get interested in having a developed and thought out and shared perspective on life, so that their contacts, which to some extent might be only internet contacts, become flesh and blood, and then they begin to have a sense of purposeful belonging. That's one thing. Another thing I think works, and I've seen it so often, there's a moment in which somebody is touched by beauty. There might be they step inside a church, it might be they go to a shrine, it might be the beauty of nature, it might be the love of a friendship, but that suddenly takes them out of themselves. And so often I've heard people say they step into a church and, there's something here. Can I find out a bit more about it? We have, thousands of visitors in the cathedral each day. And I think about 50% of them are really literally visitors. Now, sometimes I said to a group of people the other day, they were coming to pray. I said, there are 12.8 million bricks in this cathedral. And every one of them has been filled by the prayers of the people for the last 100 years. Now this afternoon, you add yours to this place, because then that's a gift to people who come after you. So there's something of a deep community, faithful investment in a place of prayer and a place of worship, and it touches people. It's a kind of beauty, really. And it's not the kind of beauty that says, I want to possess that, I want to buy that, I want it to be mine. It's the kind of beauty that says, wow, can I give myself something into this? Yeah.
Is there also a feeling that people, like you said, people are searching for, a British value?
Yeah.
You said society seems fragmented, where people are concerned about immigration. You've seen obviously the support for Reform UK recently has increased. People look at small boats and you see lots of young men in their 20s and 30s from lots of different countries coming here. Concerns about jobs. A lot of these people may not be Christian. I don't know.
No.
There are obviously statistics on who comes into the country. People have a concern that in time they look at their communities and say, my community in the last 10 years has changed dramatically, in terms of its ethnicity. Do you think that could be part to it as well? Some people are clinging on to what could be a British value?
I don't think that's why people are expressing interest in the Catholic Church, no. Because like in the parishes in this diocese, many of them have people from 40 different nationalities attending Mass. So if you go into a Catholic church, it looks a bit like the streets outside, frankly, in terms of ethnicity. So I don't think that's why they would look to the Catholic Church. I think there is an unease, and I think there is an upsurge of anxiety about how are we handling, what's our place in this world? How are we handling some of the hugely dramatic shifts that are taking place around the world? But I remember, I don't know if you do, it's going back a bit now, there was one long effort to try and establish British values. And it was very difficult, actually. I remember one slightly cynical commentator saying, British values, we queue.
Queuing is usually top of it.
Yeah. So,
politeness.
Yeah, and politeness,
Yeah.
So I think when it comes to values, what people are looking for is, what are the basic human values that we share? How do I recognise in somebody else my shared humanity? And I think that's one of the things that pressure, vulnerability, wrong thinking, uncritical thinking can erode. Because we very quickly get into, well, it's us or them. Now, that has long roots, you remember. But once we begin to think of it in terms of, well, they're different. I'm this, they're that. This is us, that's them. We're into a world that we're constructing that I don't think has ever been true, frankly. I mean, who is the pure English person? There aren't many in this country. I'm not. You're not, probably.
Probably not going back a certain degree.
Yeah. So, it's how does that us and them? I think it's based a bit on fear. I think it's based quite a bit on, how can I put this? The depth of the challenge that politicians face. I can remember 10 years ago campaigning for the recognition of people who have been in this country unregistered and have been working for the last 10 years. This is 10 years ago. It was rejected, there was no action taken. And so that problem that was not tackled then has just grown and grown and grown. And there's no doubt in my mind, a country has the right to have an immigration policy, and a country has a right to try and manage that. But it has to be done in a humane way. And that means accessible and well-resourced points of entry. It means routes, which we've done for some people, for people from the Ukraine, for people from Hong Kong. So we can do it, but it's a huge political challenge. And sometimes on the edges of politics, there's a recourse just to kind of black on white us and them, and let's see how this plays out. I really think it's probably the biggest challenge we face, actually, and not just this country. And therefore it's important that we cooperate. It's fascinating just to pick up bits of what the King will say to President Macron today, about our need to cooperate. Now, he's not explicit, but I think everybody knows we're talking about how do we defeat the criminality that is involved in those boats crossing the channel. I don't think they're the biggest issue in immigration, but they're the most dramatic and they're the most criminally led. How do we tackle an international slave trade?
Yeah, modern slavery is what you think of when you see the boats, isn't it? Because you fear that they're being brought over here and brought into
people are brought in through Heathrow.
Yeah.
And the minute they come off the plane into the cafe, that they collect up the passports, and that's
you have a debt of transport, and you must now work that debt off.
In this issue, there's a huge criminality, and it's a hugely profitable thing. So it's complex, and it needs international cooperation. It needs a system of just and honest access for people who are actually in desperate straits, and there are many, many, many millions of people who are desperate because what they've left behind is destructive and getting worse. And these are not easy challenges.
We talked about fragmented society, and I want to talk about Middle East because that's one topic which seems to divide everybody in this country, even around a dinner table. Do you think sometimes when on the Middle East it's one of these things where it really does split opinion in this country to the point where it becomes quite angry? It's quite alarming. Get protests on both sides. People of Jewish faith say they feel uncomfortable even going to a music festival because these things are brought up. I just wondered your view on that, as well as obviously it's horrific what's going on in Palestine.
It is.
I wondered what you thought about that as well.
Do you remember the film The Conclave?
Mm-hmm.
And
watched it not that long ago, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't watched it, but I've read the book and heard a lot about it, and I've done the real thing.
I was going to say, you don't need to watch it.
But in the Ray Fiennes says something like that: certainty, uncritical certainty, is one of the great enemies.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot to be said for that. We see it manifested in all these ways in which people are cancelled because issues are down to black and white and issues are down to uncritical certainty. I mean, the situation in the Middle East, it affects me very deeply, actually. I've been twice to Gaza, to the Catholic parish in Gaza. I know the patriarch there quite well. 10 years ago when I was there, it was perfectly clear that Gaza was dominated by Hamas. The priest who what was it, 6-9 months ago, was desperate to get back into Gaza because he was the parish priest, but he happened to be in Jerusalem on October the 7th. He was probably the only man in the world who wanted to get into Gaza and stay there. But he told me, we know when there's going to be another rocket attack against Israel because all the big cars disappear off the street.
Right.
And he said, we'll get electricity for 6 hours and then it goes underground. So, I mean, my heart goes out to the people of Gaza who they've been shut in. Getting in and out of Gaza is very difficult, very humiliating for anybody. But in there, there's been a gang that have been running the prison, if you like. And what happened on October the 7th should never, ever, ever be forgotten. On the other hand, no terrorist organisation that I can think of has ever been defeated in a battlefield. They have to be, as they say, the swamp has to be drained. They have to lose their background, lose their support. Well, I don't think this is going to undermine Hamas in the long run. And so you have to say, where is this going? And then you have the conflicting stories that the IDF try to alert people to what's going to happen, that Hamas hide behind the hospitals and the schools, and the fact that, you know, people, it would appear, are being virtually starved. So there is great cause and great anger on both sides, which I understand. Now, the Catholic Patriarch in Jerusalem, he's very clear, because he's responsible for the Catholic community in Gaza. He says, our task is simply to stay put. So the one thing that he believes the Catholic Church, a presence they can bring, is at least the possibility of stability. He says, I can't change any of this. And the compound in Gaza City, I believe, is still sheltering 500 people. You know, they have their own well. We tried to send a lot of support. They survive. And as far as I know, it's still a reasonably safe enclave. Obviously, there's only about 150 Catholic families in Gaza. So they've got all their neighbours in, Orthodox and Muslims people. So just stay and endure. That's his view. And that's in my heart, I think, as I watch this.
Do you have concerns about the reaction to what Israel is doing to Palestine is creating heightened anti-Semitism in this country? People are claiming that they feel more unsafe.
I have to respect that view, and I can quite imagine it. And equally, you know, I know friends of mine who are Muslim leaders who won't walk the street in their robes now. They'll take them off. And there was a time, obviously, there was a time 300 years ago in this country when I would have had to do the same. And there's a time more recently in a place like Dublin. I've known Irish priests, and they say they take the collar off when they're in Dublin because they get abuse because of the failures of the church. But all parties are fearful, I think. And it's again, we have to dig down for our shared humanity, you know, and try to understand that all these things divide us and separate us, but please, this is a fellow human being you're standing in front of, and just calm yourself and be a bit more critical about yourself, less certain, and be a bit more compassionate and forgiving even. But that's difficult. But we have to dig down and find our shared humanity over and over again.
And just briefly touching on, obviously, Ukraine, another war zone, 3.5 years that's been going on for. I mean, you must have met some refugees, no doubt, in that time.
Yeah.
And heard some horrific stories.
Of human trafficking.
How do we stop these war zones from escalating, and how do we end them? How do we find a negotiation?
Well, I think, as you say, most wars end in some sort of negotiation with the weakening of one side.
Do you think Donald Trump will find a negotiation?
Who knows? He has an approach which seems to me to be a combination of trying to do a deal and bullying people.
Yeah. He likes deals, doesn't he?
Pardon?
He likes deals.
He likes deals. For him, policy is deals.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's the classic definition of what politics means, but it's a rough world, and it's a little bit heartening to hear in the last couple of days that they're edging towards possible elements of a future.
Just wanted to very, very briefly touch on welfare cuts. I know that there's obviously been, the government has looked to try and trim the welfare. And PIP. Some people have said that, you know, they're balancing books on the back of the poor. I think the Lib Dems said that. bearing in mind that there's lots of people living in real poverty at the moment, do you have real concerns for this?
Well, I think no Christian certainly can sleep at night without having some contribution to make to the relief of poverty. And I'd be proud of I think what the Catholic Church in this diocese does in that regard. We've built up an organisation called Caritas over the last 10 years, and that's the same in many other parts of the Catholic community in England and Wales. And people are generous towards it. It's proficient. It has a whole variety of initiatives, from food banks to shelters to educational issues like how do you make the most of what you have got, fighting against food waste, all of those very, very practical things we try and do. And obviously schools are a great outreach for that, with breakfast clubs and all. So there's that positive on the ground response, which makes a big difference to many people's lives. Like we have, give you one example, we have one small fund that it makes grants to people for funeral expenses. You know, that's just one tiny item. But when somebody dies, it begins to get expensive. You know, or we've got another fund that will help people buy or replace broken down, you know, kitchen equipment and things like that. I think the politics of it is very difficult because, how can you put it? To be generous in the support to the needy, you also need to create the wealth. And that's a difficult balance. There are different approaches to it, but what seems to me at the moment, this government, not in its ideology, but is having to increase taxation, and that will not increase productivity. And so we're in a very difficult moment, I think. And it needs a rounded consideration of, yeah, we've got to be generous, but yeah, we've got to have the means to be generous, otherwise it's just soaring government debt, which doesn't help in the long run.
My very last question is really, what next for Cardinal Nichols? I know a couple of years ago, you had offered to tender resignation when inquiry reports came out, and you said that was rejected. And then when we elected the Pope, there were some reports where it said that you had told people, I'm not interested, I'm ruling myself out, I'm 79. I'm not sure of the accuracy of these. I just wondered where you see yourself in the next couple of years.
Okay, no.
And I also saw, was that a Liverpool shirt above the doorway there? So are you hoping to, in the next couple of years, see a bit more of Liverpool?
Could well be. No, when I was, the rules are very simple. When you're 75, you offer your resignation. I did that. It happened to coincide with that ICSA thing, but the general rule that's developed is that cardinals are expected to carry on till they're 80. So I'm 80 in November, and the process will have started to find a successor for me. But I'll stay, I expect I'll stay until there's somebody ready to come in. But yeah.
And as a Liverpool fan, very last question, you must have been horrified, obviously, with the news of Diego Jota and what happened with him. Where were you when you heard the news, and what was your initial thoughts?
No, I was here. I think the funeral in particular kind of brings me to tears, frankly. And you have to think of it, first of all, for that family. You know, a person I know quite well prepared Diogo and his wife for their wedding and was in their home, and his own personal testimony was the same as the others. You know, what a lovely family this was, and what a fine background in the village or the town where they grew up and had known each other since children. And there was this whole sense that with their marriage, all of this had come together, and all of this was now kind of whole. And then 11 days later, you know, it's broken apart. And it shows you the limit of our human capacity to comprehend and live with things. And, you know, we're in in the Catholic Church, we're in a Jubilee year in which the motto is, we're pilgrims in hope. And sometimes Christian hope is struck dumb because there are no words. And then all you can say is, we'll be with you. A bit like the patriarch in Jerusalem, we'll stay, we'll be with you. And you think of that, I think of the young bride from 11 days ago. And it's very moving. You know, at the end of the wedding ceremony, they had the singing of the Ave Maria, and they did the same at the end of the funeral. You know, to connect these two things so closely, I think is really, I find it upsetting.
And you talk about hope, but I was there on the Thursday morning when the news was announced. I was at Anfield. I went there, and to see all these people saying, I had to come. They lay shirts, scarves, that fills you with hope as well, don't you?
Well, it is. And in that sense, it's the good motto. You will not leave you alone. You'll not walk alone. And all of those things express something which is deeply true of our humanity. And to go back to the first point, we are not autonomous individuals, not by any stretch. And anyone who puts that first is not serving the best of our human family.
None of us walk alone.
No.
Your Eminence, thank you so much for your time.
Okay.
Cardinal Nichols, it's been a pleasure.